All right, listeners, are you ready to unlock some language learning secrets? I know I am.
Mhm.
We get a lot of questions about fluency and acquisition, and, well, frankly, I think it's time for a deep dive.
Absolutely.
What do these terms really mean for language learners like us? I mean, we share them all the time, but
Right.
what's the real deal? So you sent over this fascinating article titled Fluency versus Language Acquisition, Understanding the Difference. And
Yeah.
I gotta say, I'm really curious to see if it lives up to its promise. You
Yeah.
know, does it actually get to the heart of what these terms mean for those of us, in the trenches trying to learn a new language?
Well, I think you'd be pleasantly surprised.
Hmm.
This article, it doesn't just, define the terms. It kind of throws down a gauntlet. It
Yeah.
sparks a debate about what it really means to know a language.
Ooh, okay, I'm intrigued already. So before we jump into that debate, let's just ground ourselves, like level set.
Sort of.
What are the working definitions here of fluency and acquisition according to this article?
Well, the article draws a very clear distinction. Fluency is all about outward performance. It's that smooth, effortless communication, where you're not constantly translating in your head or stumbling over every other word. Think of it like a figure skater gliding across the ice. That's fluency in action.
Hmm. So it's about being able to perform in the language, even if you don't necessarily understand every single grammatical nuance or deeper meaning underneath.
Exactly. Now, acquisition, on the other hand, that runs much deeper. It's about internalizing the language, almost like you've absorbed it into your very being. It's more like the way children intuitively pick up their native tongue, without ever cracking open a grammar book.
That makes sense. So it's more about that unconscious understanding of the language, the feel for it, rather than just, being able to string sentences together.
You got it. And here's where it gets interesting. The article argues that these two things, fluency and acquisition, they're not always a package deal.
Wait, really? You're telling me you can be fluent without truly acquiring a language? Or know a language deeply but still sound totally awkward when you try to speak it? How is that even possible?
Well, think about it this way. You can memorize phrases, right? Become pretty good at mimicking pronunciation, even achieve a certain level of conversational fluency. But that doesn't necessarily mean you've grasped the underlying structure of the language, or that you can navigate its more subtle complexities.
So someone who can order food at a restaurant, have some basic small talk,
Hmm.
but then would be completely lost in a nuanced discussion about politics or literature.
Exactly. And the reverse is also true. Someone might have a deep understanding of the grammatical structure, an impressive vocabulary, but due to lack of practice or maybe just confidence, their spoken fluency kind of lags behind.
Wow. This is already blowing my mind. It's like realizing there's this whole other dimension to language learning that I hadn't even considered before. So how do we even begin to reach this ideal state of both fluency and acquisition? I mean, I know there are tons of different methods out there,
Really?
but where do we even start?
Well, the article digs into that too, and that's where things get really interesting. It's almost like a battle royale of language learning philosophies. You've got everything from the classic grammar translation method
Okay.
to full-on immersion, and each approach comes with its own set of pros and cons.
Okay, walk me through this battle royale. What are the major players and how do they approach language learning differently?
All right, let's start with the communicative approach. This one kind of throws you right into the deep end. Focuses on using the language in real-life situations from day one. So think conversations, role-playing, even debates, all geared towards actual communication rather than just rote memorization.
So it's less about textbook exercises and more about just diving in and interacting with the language organically. That sounds terrifying, but also kind of exhilarating.
It definitely prioritizes real-world usage, but yeah, it's not for everyone. Now, another popular method is based on something called the input hypothesis. This was developed by a linguist named Stephen Krashen.
Okay, I've heard of that. But I'll be honest, I'm a little fuzzy on the details. What's the core idea behind the input hypothesis?
So imagine immersing yourself in content that's just slightly above your current level of understanding. So think like graded readers or podcasts designed for learners or even, children's shows in your target language. The idea is that by consistently exposing yourself to this comprehensible input, your brain will naturally start to absorb the patterns and structures of the language, much like a child does.
So it's about surrounding yourself with the language and trusting your brain to make those connections without forcing it. That's a pretty different philosophy from, drilling grammar rules.
Exactly. It relies on a more subconscious form of learning, but it does require a lot of patience and trust in the process.
All right, so we've got the communicative approach, we've got the input hypothesis. What other contenders are in this language learning showdown?
Well, you can't talk about language learning methods without mentioning the classic right, the grammar translation method. It's that old school approach that many of us experienced in school. Heavy emphasis on memorizing vocabulary lists, mastering grammar rules, translating sentences back and forth.
Yes, the good old days of verb conjugations and endless vocabulary quizzes. Not always the most thrilling way to learn, but it definitely gave you a solid foundation, right?
It can be effective for building a strong grammatical base and expanding your vocabulary. But critics argue that it often falls short when it comes to developing fluency and conversational skills.
That makes sense. So if the grammar translation method is all about structure and rules, what about the complete opposite end of the spectrum? What about full immersion?
Ugh. Immersion, often touted as the most natural and effective way to learn, mimicking the way children acquire their first language. Think about being dropped into a foreign country where you're forced to use the language to survive.
Talk about a trial by fire. That sounds both incredibly effective and absolutely terrifying. It's not exactly practical for everyone, though, is it?
You're right. While it can be highly effective, it does require a certain level of commitment and access to resources that not everyone has.
Okay, so we've got the communicative approach, we've got the input hypothesis, we've got the grammar translation method, and we've got full immersion. Are there any other major players in this language learning battle royale?
We've got two more to cover, task-based learning and the natural approach.
Okay, all ears, lay it on me.
All right, so task-based learning is all about applying what you've learned to practical real-world tasks. So imagine using the language to book a hotel room, order food at a restaurant, navigate public transportation in a foreign city. The focus is on using language as a tool to accomplish specific goals.
That sounds incredibly practical and engaging. You're learning by doing, and you're immediately seeing the real-world application of your knowledge.
Exactly. Now, the natural approach, this was developed by Krashen and Terrell. It emphasizes creating a low-stress learning environment that mirrors the way children acquire language. Focus on communication and comprehension first, without emphasizing explicit grammar instruction in the early stages.
So it's about building fluency and confidence naturally without getting bogged down in rules and technicalities right away. Sounds like a gentler, more intuitive approach.
It definitely prioritizes creating a positive and encouraging learning environment. The idea is that by reducing anxiety and focusing on meaningful communication, learners are more likely to progress naturally and enjoy the process.
Okay, so we've got a whole smorgasbord of language learning approaches here. It's almost overwhelming. How on earth are we supposed to choose the right method for us? It sounds like they all have their own strengths and weaknesses.
And that's exactly the point the article raises. There is no single best method for everyone.
So it's less about finding the magic formula and more about figuring out what works best for your individual learning style, goals, and circumstances.
Precisely. The key is to understand the different approaches. Be honest with yourself about your strengths and weaknesses as a learner, and then experiment to find what resonates with you.
So no more searching for the holy grail of language learning methods. We're giving ourselves permission to try things out, see what sticks, maybe even combine different approaches.
Absolutely. And that's what we'll be delving into in the next part of our deep dive. Navigating the vast landscape of language learning approaches and finding the path that's right for you.
This is already making me rethink my entire approach to language learning. I can't wait to unpack this further. For our listeners, get ready for part 2, where we'll be digging deeper into the world of language learning methods and figuring out how to choose the right tools for the job. Okay, so we've laid out like the battlefield, the different philosophies of language learning, but now comes the fun part, like how do we actually navigate this whole landscape and choose the right weapons, the right tools for our own language learning journey? I'm ready to map out my strategy.
That's the spirit. And the first thing to consider is your learning style. Are you someone who thrives on structure and rules, or do you prefer a more immersive kind of hands-on approach?
I'm definitely a learn by doing kind of person.
Yeah.
Give me real life scenarios, conversations, even the occasional embarrassing blunder. That's how I seem to learn best. But I know some people who swear by flashcards and grammar drills.
And that's perfectly fine. The key is to be honest with yourself about what works best for you. If you thrive on structure, maybe the grammar translation method or a structured online course would be a good starting point. If you're more of an experiential learner, perhaps the communicative approach or task-based learning would be a better fit.
So it's about aligning the method with your natural learning instincts. That makes a lot of sense. But what about our language learning goals? Shouldn't that play a role in choosing the right approach too?
Absolutely. Your goals should definitely guide your strategy. If you're aiming for conversational fluency, to travel or connect with native speakers, you might prioritize methods that emphasize speaking and listening skills. If you need to read academic papers or write professionally, you might focus on developing reading and writing proficiency.
So someone who wants to like casually chat with locals at a cafe might take a different path than someone who's preparing for like a university lecture in a foreign language.
Exactly. It's all about tailoring your approach to your specific goals. And don't forget about practical considerations too, like your available time, your resources, your learning environment. You have access to native speakers or language exchange partners. Can you immerse yourself in the target culture, even if it's just through media and online communities? These factors can all influence your choice of method as well.
It sounds like there's a lot of like self-reflection and strategic planning involved before we even like utter our first foreign phrase. But I guess that makes sense. We wouldn't just like randomly choose a workout routine without considering our fitness goals and lifestyle, right?
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Just like with physical fitness, achieving your language learning goals requires a tailored approach.
Huh.
One that takes into account your individual needs and circumstances.
Okay, so let's say we've done our soul searching, we've defined our goals, we've assessed our resources, we're standing at this massive language learning buffet, right, ready to pile our plates with different methods and techniques. How do we even begin to make sense of all the options? It still feels a bit overwhelming.
Don't worry, you don't have to go it alone. There's a wealth of resources available to help you navigate the language learning landscape. You can explore online forums, language learning communities, read reviews of different language courses and apps, even consult with language teachers or tutors for personalized guidance.
So it's about like tapping into the collective wisdom of the language learning community and finding resources that resonate with our individual needs and preferences.
Exactly. Think of it as assembling your own personal language learning toolkit. You might start with a structured online course to build a solid foundation, then supplement it with conversation practice through a language exchange app, and immerse yourself in the culture through movies, music, podcasts.
I love that. Building a personalized language learning ecosystem. It's not about finding the one right method. It's about curating a blend of approaches that work for you.
And don't be afraid to experiment. What works for one person might not work for another. It's all about finding what clicks with your learning style and what keeps you engaged and motivated.
So we're giving ourselves permission to try different things, mix and match, adjust our strategy as we go along. No more feeling like we have to stick to one rigid method.
Exactly. Language learning is a journey, not a destination. Embrace the process, be open to new discoveries, and don't be afraid to adjust your course as you learn and grow.
That's such a liberating way to think about it. It takes the pressure off finding the perfect method and allows us to focus on the joy of exploration and discovery. So we've talked about choosing the right tools and methods, but what about the internal game? I'm talking of the mindset, the self-talk, that whole emotional roller coaster that comes with language learning.
That's a crucial aspect that's often overlooked. The psychological side of language learning can be just as important as the methods and techniques we use.
I know from personal experience that things like fear of making mistakes, perfectionism, lack of confidence, they can really sabotage your progress. How do we tackle these internal roadblocks and cultivate a more positive and resilient mindset?
The first step is recognizing that making mistakes is not a sign of failure, but rather an essential part of the learning process. It's through our errors that we learn and grow.
Easier said than done, right? It's hard to shake that feeling of embarrassment when you like stumble over your words or accidentally say something completely nonsensical.
I understand. It's natural to feel self-conscious, but remember that every language learner goes through this. Native speakers rarely judge learners harshly for making mistakes, especially if you're making an effort to communicate.
That's good to hear. So instead of beating ourselves up over every little blunder, we should try to reframe those mistakes as opportunities for learning and growth.
Exactly. Embrace those moments as stepping stones on your language journey. Another powerful tool is positive self-talk. Pay attention to the language you use when you're talking to yourself about your language skills. Are you constantly criticizing yourself, focusing on your shortcomings? Or are you acknowledging your progress and celebrating your achievements, no matter how small?
Ooh, I'm definitely guilty of the negative self-talk. It's so easy to get caught up in what I'm not doing well and forget to like appreciate how far I've come.
That's a common trap. Try to shift your focus to your strengths and accomplishments. Celebrate every milestone, no matter how small, And remind yourself that you're making progress every time you step outside your comfort zone and use the language.
It's like giving ourselves a pep talk, you
Yeah.
know? Reminding ourselves why we're doing this and acknowledging the effort we're putting in. I can see how that could make a big difference in motivation and resilience. What else can we do to combat those pesky feelings of self-doubt and like build that confidence?
Setting realistic goals and breaking them down into smaller, achievable steps can be incredibly helpful. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by the enormity of becoming fluent, focus on mastering one grammar point, learning 10 new words, having a 5-minute conversation with a language exchange partner.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like breaking down a marathon into manageable mile markers. It makes the whole journey feel less daunting and helps you stay motivated along the way.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of community. Connect with other language learners, whether it's online or in person. Share your struggles, celebrate your victories, and support each other through the ups and downs of the language learning journey.
There's something so incredibly encouraging about knowing that you're not alone in this. Having a supportive community can make all the difference when you're facing challenges or feeling discouraged. This has been such an eye-opening conversation. We've covered so much ground, from choosing the right methods to nurturing a positive and resilient mindset.
It's been a pleasure exploring these multifaceted aspects of language learning with you. I hope our listeners are feeling inspired and empowered to embark on their own language adventures.
Me too. But before we wrap up part 2, I'm curious. We've talked a lot about the practical and psychological aspects of language learning, but what about the unexpected benefits? What are some of the hidden perks that go beyond just being able to communicate in a new language? That's something to ponder as we head into the final part of our deep dive. Okay, so we're back and ready to wrap up our fluency versus acquisition deep dive, but I'm really excited to talk about these unexpected benefits you mentioned. We often focus on those practical reasons to learn a new language, like travel, career opportunities, connecting with more people.
Right.
But I have a feeling like there's this whole other world of perks that we don't even think about.
You're absolutely right.
So spill the beans. What are some of those unexpected benefits that go beyond just, being able to order a coffee in Italian or ask for directions in Japanese?
Well, one of the most fascinating benefits is the impact it can have on your cognitive abilities. Studies have shown that multilingual individuals often have better memory-improved problem-solving skills, and even a heightened ability to multitask.
Wait, are you saying that learning a new language can actually make you smarter?
Well, it's not about becoming a genius overnight or anything, but the mental gymnastics involved in juggling multiple languages do seem to strengthen certain cognitive muscles. It's like cross-training for your brain.
That's pretty amazing. So my brain gets a workout, but what about my emotional and social well-being? Are there any unexpected benefits there too?
Absolutely. Learning a new language can significantly boost your empathy and cultural awareness. When you delve into another language, you inevitably encounter different perspectives, customs, and ways of thinking.
So it's like stepping outside of your own little cultural bubble and seeing the world through a completely different lens.
Precisely. And that can make you more understanding, more tolerant, and more open-minded in your interactions with others. You start to see the world as this richer, more nuanced tapestry of human experiences.
I love that imagery. So not only can learning a language make you mentally sharper, it can also make you a more empathetic and understanding human being. Are there any other hidden gems we haven't unearthed yet?
Here's one that might surprise you. Learning a new language can boost your creativity and innovation.
Really?
Yeah, when you acquire a new language, you're essentially expanding your mental toolbox. You gain new ways of expressing yourself, new metaphors, new ways of framing ideas.
So learning a new language can actually make you more creative. How does that work?
Well, think of it this way. Each language has its own unique way of slicing and dicing reality. By learning a new language, you're essentially acquiring a new set of mental lenses through which to view the world. And this linguistic flexibility can spark new ideas, help you solve problems in innovative ways, and even enhance your artistic expression.
That's incredible. It's like unlocking this hidden creative potential within yourself. And I bet this linguistic flexibility comes in handy when traveling as well.
Oh, you're absolutely right. When you can communicate in the local language, travel becomes a truly immersive experience. You can have meaningful conversations with locals, navigate unfamiliar situations with ease, and truly appreciate the nuances of the culture.
Yeah, there's nothing quite like connecting with people in their own language, It just opens up this whole new level of understanding and appreciation for the place you're visiting.
Exactly. It's like unlocking a secret door to a richer, more authentic travel experience.
Wow, we've uncovered a treasure trove of unexpected benefits here. I feel like I have a whole new perspective on language learning now. It's not just about acquiring a practical skill, it's about enriching your life on so many different levels.
It's a journey of personal growth and transformation.
It really is. So, for our listeners out there who might be on the fence about diving into a new language, what's the key message we want to leave them with?
Embrace the challenge. You have nothing to lose and a world of possibilities to gain.
Yeah.
Learning a new language is a gift. You give yourself a gift that keeps on giving in ways you might never have imagined.
Beautifully said. And on that inspiring note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive. We've explored the nuances of fluency versus acquisition, debunked some common myths, and uncovered a wealth of unexpected benefits.
It's been a pleasure unraveling these fascinating topics with you.
Likewise, to all our listeners out there, remember the world is waiting to be explored one language at a time. Until next time, keep those language gears turning.